April 21st, 1989, Nintendo is about to release their newest piece of entertainment technology. A piece of technology that would not only change video games as a whole, but how people interacted with technology as a whole. Because while humans have always had forms of portable entertainment, or fidget toys and games, both physical and eventually electronic, the path Nintendo was about to set us down was a brand new one, careening a million tails per hour towards a new era, the era of handheld gaming. The Nintendo Game Boy would kickstart one of the most interesting and beloved areas of gaming, not only for me, but for many others across the globe. Up until getting a PS3 for my 13th birthday, handheld gaming was the main way I consumed video games, outside of borrowing consoles and video games from my friends or using my brother's Xbox and GameCube. So believe me when I say I hold this subgenre of gaming in fairly high regard, partially due to nostalgia, but also due to the fact of how this type of gaming developed and evolved up until the Switch, which I would like to preface the rest of this video by saying, I like the Nintendo Switch. I think it's one of the coolest things ever made. I started writing this also before the Switch 2 controversies, okay? Even though $90 games is crazy, and also a button that costs $10 is crazy, but like I did that, none of that shit was a thing when I started writing the script. This is not a Nintendo Switch slander video, I promise you. The title be damned. The title was just to get you to click on it, I swear. Now, Nintendo always set out to make a portable console, even as early as the Game Boy. But due to the obvious hardware limitations at the time, and the limitations they would face as tech got better and video games got bigger, including handheld video games, the design philosophy for both handheld games and the handhelds themselves splintered off into almost this little micro ecosystem away from hardcore console and even more hardcore PC gaming. These two areas of gaming still interacted, of course, but if console and PC gaming is a river, handheld gaming was like the distributary to the side of it, you know, the wetlands that kind of grew around the river. In fact, this area of gaming only existed because of the river next to it, and were influenced by it, but weren't the river itself. Similar to a wetland only existing because, well, a river exists. You know, is this making sense? In fact, even as early as like the Game Boy Advance, they were porting console games from older consoles to these handhelds because they just fit in that environment. That is how I played both Mario World and Link to the Past for the first time as a kid. It was on a Game Boy Advance, the superior way, with the shitty sound chip. They would even add like small updates and like fixes to these older console games when they ported them to handhelds to make them fit in this microsystem even more, whether it's updating the saves or even just adding little sound effects from future games that also kind of existed in that area. They would just add these little tweaks, just these little tweaks to make it more of a handheld game, even though it's a game that already kind of fit in that environment. Like I think for Super Mario World on the Game Boy Advance, it would track the dragon coins, and also when you got hit, you would still remain as Big Mario versus the original version of Super Mario World, where you would go to Little Mario and your dragon coins were not tracked at all. Just tiny things, just tiny little things, just to make it more of a pick it up, put it down experience. And this type of, you know, tweaking would still happen even as bigger console games were ported onto like newer handhelds. Like, for example, with the Xenoblade remake on the new 3DS, they added a whole bunch of shit that was not in the Wii version to make that more of a playable game in the handheld form. And also just to fix it, because the original Wii version is kind of a mess. Now, at this point, you've heard me use words like micro-ecosystem and invasive species and all these other weird gobbledygook-ass words multiple times, and you're probably sitting there like, What is this nigga talking about, man? What is he just yapping? Does he even know what he's talking about? What even is the micro ecosystem? And the answers for those questions are yes, kind of, and just let me tell you. Just hold on. I'm just buttering you up. First off, the micro ecosystem isn't in reference to the amount of people interacting with it. Not at all. The micro ecosystem is in reference to the scope and investment you need to interact with it. This isn't a mainline hardcore $600 RTX giant enemy crab Steam summer sale gaming. Even at its most extreme, it was maybe an onboarding or an introduction / initiation to that type of gaming. Shout out to Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. I love you, Terra. I love you. I love you, dude. I love this game. Oh, I love playing as my favorite character. Oh man, this game. But for the most part, it was significantly more laid back, more casual, which allowed it to influence tons of people. Not everybody wants to go whitewater rafting, but most people will find a wetland interesting enough to explore if they get the chance. This is like handheld gaming. This is you see this, the metaphors, the similes. They're starting, the wires are starting to cross. Is this making sense? Handheld gaming being so laid back is what led to things like the DS being the second or third highest selling console of all time. Like, that's actually insane. And to me, in my opinion, let me just stress that. To me, in my opinion, this micro ecosystem of handheld gaming consisted of 7 key components. Component number 1 is simplicity. Handhelds are beautifully simple, from both their designs to most of the games. Even the more complex ones as time went on were usually easy to pick up and hard to master. Beautifully simple. And with everything, of course, there's definitely exceptions to this rule. You know, you might get that one game where you have to use the sun at a certain time of day to use the shadows off the trees in real life from the actual sun to find your way through the woods or something. It was a Hideo Kojima game, don't worry about it. But even into the 3DS era, hyper complicated games were pretty rare because the simplicity is what the main idea of handheld gaming was, and is the direct through line for which every other component exists and directly feeds back into. The second factor is accessibility. Handheld gaming, even though it is a micro ecosystem, casts a wide net. Biodiversity in this ecosystem is very high because this simplicity allowed it to be accessible to a wider variety of people, both consumer and developer, which then directly feeds into the next component. Number 3, diversity of content. Even though handheld gaming is much simpler than mainline gaming, it's a lot less complex than a rushing river, this simplicity made it so it was easier to experiment with different types of game and game design. There are many types of handheld games because of this, from platformers to RPGs to games that aren't even really games, like Nintendogs or Colors 3D or Flip Note Haitna, Cookie Mama, recipe books, Brain Academy, Art Academy, model game, massage game. What?
Go fish! Love it!
Number 4, plug and play. Handheld games are instant. You plug and you play. You buy the card, you put it in, and it goes. That's how it always was, even into the digital games era and the 3DS having a skillion updates a week. If you had a physical game, you plugged it in, and it went. From 101 Dalmatians for the Game Boy Color, all the way to Xenoblade Remastered and Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate for the 3DS. You plugged it in, and it went. Your level of investment was completely dependent on you. Number 5, portability. Handheld gaming is quite literally just that. Handheld. The majority of handheld consoles outside of maybe the first Game Boy were easy to just put in your pocket and take wherever you went, which even extended to the future handheld consoles like the DS and the PSP to allow you to suspend gaming sessions basically whenever and without even turning it off. In the case of the DS, you could close it and everything would just pause. You could just leave it like that for hours, days even. Turn it back on, you'd still have some battery left. The PSP, you just either tapped or flipped up the power button switch, automatic paused. You flipped it again, you were back in. This aspect only feeds into the actual portable plug and play nature of handhelds, which is also why component number 6 is just as crucial to this portability factor. Component number 6 is battery life / battery extension. This component is super crucial. to every handheld that had ever existed. Because if the battery life of a handheld is ass, and you have no way to suspend gaming sessions as well in order to save battery but maintain play, it ain't really a handheld. For example, even though the Game Boy Advance couldn't really suspend play, the battery life on that thing was actually crazy for the time, lasting 10 hours with the backlight blaring on, or 18 hours with it off. I'm talking you could play for 2 hours, chuck it in your backpack, forget about it for a week, come back, 80% of the battery's still gonna be there. It was actually kind of insane. And given that most Game Boy Advance games are only between 4 to 6 hours long, you could basically beat 3 to 5 of them before needing a single charge. And the DS Lite almost had 20 hours of battery life, given you could just suspend gaming sessions by closing it and throwing it in your book bag or on your bed. It wasn't until around the 3DS era that we started getting sub 10-hour battery life, but 9 hours isn't too bad when you can still suspend play for 30 hours by closing it. However, none of these components matter at all if the 7th component isn't included, because the 7th component is the most crucial after simplicity, because it's the basis of simplicity. Every other component I've listed pales in comparison to this one in terms of how much it affects the actual simplicity of handheld gaming. And that is component number 7. Handheld gaming is cheap. Let me say it again. Handheld gaming is cheap. If it's not cheap, nothing else matters. The reason it's simple, the reason it's accessible, with the diverse lineup, with the instant plug and play, the suspending of play, the closing it, being able to throw it somewhere else, the 30 hours of suspended life, only needing 2 to 3 hours to charge fully. This all ties to the fact that handheld gaming is cheap. Even from the launch of the Game Boy, this has been an essential part of handheld gaming's identity. The original Game Boy came out for $89.99 in 1989, which is around $230 now, which is pricey. However, the NES at the time, until the Super Nintendo came out, was priced at $200. $200. That is $600 in today's money. Handheld gaming is always cheap, from the handheld consoles to the games to the cables to the whatever. It is an essential portion of the ecosystem, and we can prove this by looking at most of the handheld consoles that failed, because they usually failed because of 2 reasons. The battery life was ass, and it was too damn expensive. Sega Game Gear, too expensive, 4-hour battery life, required 8 batteries, failed. Atari Lynx, too expensive, shitty battery life, failed. Nvidia Shield, too expensive, shitty battery life, and it failed so bad that its corpse was used to make the Nintendo Switch. Crazy how they did them like that. Failed. Neo Geo Pocket Color. This was actually reasonably priced, and also had a battery life similar to the Game Boy Color. I'm pretty sure this only failed because Pokemon wasn't on it. But I'm just gonna say, nobody was gonna pay $70 to play Metal Slug, dude. It only cost 5 orders at Funko Land or some shit. Failed. The 3DS, people forget about this, the 3DS almost failed in its first year because of the price, along with a sub 10-hour battery life. A year into it, actually not even a year, 11 months into its life, Nintendo slashed its price to $170 and released a model with 9 to 10 hours of battery life in the form of the 2DS. Success. They saved it. And finally, the PS Vita, my beloved. It was too damn expensive. Used proprietary cards, which were also too damn expensive, and Sony gave up on it after releasing it because they had an ad that had a woman with 4 boobs. This is real. I'm not making that up. This is a real ad. Sony absolutely shit the bucket with the PS Vita. It deserved way better, but it didn't get it. Failed. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, why bring any of this up? What are we talking about? Micro ecosystems, fucking prices, components. Where are we going with this? What does all of this mean? And again, I want to preface this by saying I like the Nintendo Switch. I've even played a little bit of the Switch too at a friend's house for a couple hours, and it's even cooler than the first one. And I also understand that the Switch has basically been what Nintendo's goal was since 1989. I understand. However, in my opinion, which is all this video is, by the way, the Nintendo Switch is extremely cool, is an extremely impressive piece of technology. But it's kind of a shitty handheld in almost every aspect of what handhelds at least used to be, and to me specifically, what I desire in handheld gaming. The main reason I believe this is because it fails in 3 of the most important components. The first 2 being the battery life and the price. In terms of battery life, the Switch is so not great that even the most hardcore of Switch and Nintendo defenders don't really defend this position. The battery bleed is also pretty crazy, to the point where if you own one, at least owned one since 2017, that it probably doesn't charge to 100% anymore. And I understand that this is due to the Switch just having more functions, but a lot of the functions that are there to justify the lower battery life are either kind of useless or kind of bad. Like, what do you mean I need to download an app to my phone to plug in my mic to my phone to then talk online? What are we doing? And it's like, if you're gonna run a game like Sky at a slower frame rate than my Samsung Galaxy S10 Lite, could you at least survive my 45-minute commute if I forget to charge it the night before? Like, god damn, bro, damn. And let me just say this, while I have used the Switch 2, it was only for 2 hours and it was docked. But the message that I'm seeing in the tea leaves, you know, the wine through the grapevine, survey says the Switch 2's battery life is either about the same or even worse. Now, in terms of price, this is a twofold issue, and one of them is less of a problem than the other. Because when we actually look at the price of the actual Switch when it came out to the original Game Boy when it came out, it's almost the same, only costing about $50 more when adjusted for inflation. However, unlike most of the handhelds Nintendo released, including the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the DS, the DS Lite, the DSi, and the 3DS, and other handhelds like the PSP and the PS Vita, the Nintendo Switch never got a price drop. Even after 8 years, that joker was still $300.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. You get your goddamn ugly ass on.
But while this is annoying, it's low-key not so bad, because the original Game Boy also never got an official price drop either. So some people could argue that this is a return to form with Nintendo. However, when Nintendo didn't drop the price of the Game Boy, that was also when they were selling like $90 games in 1988. So this is not necessarily a good form that we want to see Nintendo return to. And speaking of $90 games, this ties into the second worst fold issue, the price of the games. Price of the games in Nintendo Switch is kind of crazy. These games never got price drops ever. These bitches never go on sale. It's ridiculous. And the problem is only being exacerbated by the Switch 2, which again didn't exist when I started writing this. It's okay. It's fine. It's just gotten worse. That's all I can really say. It's just gotten worse. And like I said previously, handheld gaming and handheld games have always been cheap. It's just like 30-40 years of cheapness, even back in the Game Boy and Game Boy Color days. And somehow, now, Nintendo Switch games are not only expensive, they're now the most expensive games on the market. And people hate it when you bring this up, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway. Do you wanna know when the first $60 Pokemon game came out? 2019, with the Nintendo Switch. That was the first $60 Pokemon game. From 1998 until 2019. Of when adjusted for inflation, we had 21 years of Pokemon games costing between 40 to 45 bucks, and all of a sudden with the Switch, it's 60. And to be honest, most Pokemon games were about $25 to $35 less than a month later if you didn't want a case and just bought it from behind the pane of glass at EB Games. And mind you, it's not like these are low quality games. These are games people consider classics. Red, Blue, Fire Red, Leaf Green, Diamond, Pearl, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, the original Gold and Silver. All these games cost between 40 to 45 bucks. And within like a month, we're usually 25 to 35 bucks if you bought them behind that pane of glass with no case at EB Games or GameStop. The original Steam Summer Sale, you know what I'm saying? Y'all remember that shit? The pane of glass at EB Games and eventually GameStop, where they would just have all these fucking handheld games just listed out, having all these sales like 3 for $20. All of a sudden, you got 3 Pokemon games you ain't never played on a fucking $1.75 a week salary during the summer. Like, dude, the handheld gaming has always been cheap. And people think that I'm playing, but no, this shit carried over until the 3DS era, dude. Like, those games were not expensive. Now we're in an era where Switch games and other handheld games never go down in price. Like, why is Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2 the same price? What the fuck's going on? Like, what is happening? Why is Breath of the Wild, if you want the Switch 2 version, more expensive than an already full price Breath of the Wild on the Switch? That game came out in 2017. What is happening? And I know that throughout history, Nintendo has never lowered the price of console games, like ever. But shit, man, the handheld scene was different. They would cut prices and have sales all the time. Again, they cut the price of the 3DS in 11 months. They cut the price of the Game Boy Advance in a year, and it was already selling well. The handheld scene has always been different. It's the micro ecosystem, it's the wetlands, it interacts with the river, it's not the river. It's supposed to be cheap and accessible and easy to get into. It's like the micro ecosystem, guys. Is it clicking? Is it clicking? Am I making sense, or am I just fucking wilding right now? Now, the main argument against what I'm saying is, well, Switch games aren't really handheld games, they're console games now. And to that, I'd say, exactly. The micro ecosystem no longer exists. The wetlands have been bulldozed and forced to join the torrent. All these games, they're big, expensive, probably played best with a controller and on a TV. Like, is this a handheld? Is this really handheld gaming? There's no more wetland. It's gone. It's bulldozed. It's all just big ass river now. You have to have DLC or drown. You can never go on sale again or drown. You must have microtransactions or drown. Nintendo Online or drown. No virtual console or drown. And this directly affects the portability as well. I mean, shit, these handhelds don't even fit in people's pockets anymore. A lot of them are still portable in a way more similar to like a laptop or a tablet. But is that handheld? Is that a portable handheld console? And it's crazy because it seems like they're just getting bigger. The Switch 2 is bigger than the Switch 1. The Steam Deck's bigger than both the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. And the new ROG Box Ally Fire 15,000 People X looks like it's bigger than all of them. Have you seen Phil Spencer hold that thing? It looks fucking huge. I don't have a ROG Box Ally X, so I don't know how big it is, but it looks big as shit, dude. Like, that is a thick ass handheld. Like, the ROG Box and the Steam Deck might as well be a fucking laptop with 2 controllers gorilla glued to the sides. And both of them cost like $1,000. Like, what the They both cost $1,000, and Microsoft still fired 15,000 people anyway. I can't stand these niggas, bro. They make everything worse. They're the reason we have to pay for online, and I fucking hate Microsoft. I can't do it. Like, when did handheld gaming become the specialized, super expensive thing? Why is this how this developed? Like, that is not what handheld gaming has ever been, even from its initial conceptualization. And it's just like, with all this taken into account, it's sad to say, but in my opinion, the handheld gaming micro ecosystem is just basically dead. It's been co-opted and it's turned into a specialized thing. Why how did this become the specialized, hyper expensive thing to do? Like, that's for PC gaming, that's for console gaming. What is happening? Like, the micro ecosystem is basically dead at this point, or at least it's mostly dead. Now, while I believe that most of the wetland seems to be bulldozed and gone by the big boys of gaming, it'd be unfair to say that the wetland is completely dead, mostly due to the remaining billabongs in the indie scene and the homebrew scene, and with sites like Pico 8 and itch.io and people releasing games like Good Boy Galaxy, even UFO 50 in a way, which I understand UFO 50 was actually trying to emulate NES 50 games in one cartridges, but if you've actually played UFO 50, you realize that a lot of these games play similarly to Game Boy Advance games. There's also, the Game Boy Advance homebrew scene, the people making Windows for Game Boy and stuff. There's Pico 8, which its whole idea is making basically handheld games again. Like, it seems that there's almost this drive in the indie scene, especially now, to make more of these types of games, because these types of games are important. People like a more contained microdose of game design from time to time. And it's also more appealing to general audiences who don't really want to get fully invested into these $70, $80, $90, $1,000 box adventures. This could also be seen in the fact that a lot of open source emulation consoles now seem to be emulating the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance form factor. Because when I was a kid, it usually emulated like Super Nintendo or NES or these plug and play TV stuff. But now it seems that most people want it on the go. Most people are missing the actual handheld Game Boy experience. So it not only shows that there are still signs of life, but also that there's still obviously a market looking for this type of game of experience. It almost feels like the bigger companies are trying to just force it out of existence to make you buy more expensive things. I don't know if that's true, but that's what it feels like. It's crazy because I can even provide an example of this want for a smaller, more casual, laid back portable gaming thing happening IRL with my younger brother. He has one of those open source Game Boys. It's not one of the cheap ones. It's made out of actual metal. It's really good quality. Dual analogs, 4 triggers, 2 SD card slots so you can put your own shit on it, the whole kit and caboodle. And I've seen when we leave to go to certain places, a friend's house, go to play some D&D outside, when we recently went to Canada, wherever, he would take that thing more often than he took his Switch. Like, not because it necessarily has better games than the Switch or some shit, because I think it can only handle up to the PS2 in terms of games, but because it has good games and actually fits in his motherfucking pocket because it's a fucking handheld. And again, not saying that the Switch is this completely super huge and movable object. No, it's still pretty portable. He still brought it with us when we went to Canada, but I caught him using that handheld console a little bit more often than not. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know what I'm saying? And watching this actual process play out over multiple weeks, because he got it in May. So watching it play out for the last couple of months, multiple weeks, IRL, proved to me at least that I'm not crazy for thinking this, or at least I'm not that crazy. The battery life on that thing is also much better than the Switch. Like it hits all the notes you need for an actual handheld, portable, plug and play, pick it up, put it down, cheap experience. So I guess the final question after all that, or the final series of questions, is where does this leave us? Does any of this matter? Does this video matter? Is this stupid? Is what I'm complaining about just the cost of progress? Did we need to bulldoze the wetlands in order to move forward? Is the evidence of billabongs remaining proof that something of value was lost? You know, is an actual casual experience on a cheap thing just something that like has no market anymore, even though there's people that are just super dedicated to it? Is the actual wider market for this just unattainable? Because the Switch 2, it's on its way to being one of the highest selling consoles of all time. The Nintendo Switch is like the 3rd highest selling console of all time. Am I just incorrect? Is this just an old man yelling at a cloud, wishing for a simpler thing, sometimes at least? Is what I'm complaining about absolutely pointless, and I just need to accept that time moves on and nothing of value was lost, and we just need to bulldoze our way towards the future? Probably, I don't know. Just fucking, my thought process didn't get me this far. Fucking, who won? Who's next? You decide. And you could get a more definitive answer if you buy the $15 That One Black Eye button. No more maybes, no more nuance, no more arguments, no more thought questions. Just yeses or nos, no maybe so's. For only the low price of $15 a month. Let's fucking go, dude. I'm a Mario. I'm a super